Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Road to November, the 2022 U.S. midterm elections. We have a wonderful program for you today. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded and circulated to all participants after the event. Additionally, should you have any questions that you would like to submit to the panel, you may submit them through the chat box at the bottom of the screen. With that, I'd like to turn things over to today's moderator, Eric Tannenblatt, the Global Chair of Denton's Public Policy and Regulation Practice. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you, and welcome to Denton's Road to November webinar. It's hard to believe, but we are only 27 days away from another election. An election that can and will determine the control of the Congress and state houses across the country and set the stage for the 2024 presidential election. I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of experts to give their perspectives on the election and predictions for what to expect. It's now my pleasure to welcome first Republican Congressman Rodney Davis, who's currently finishing up his 5th term in Congress, representing the 13th Congressional District in Illinois. We also have Joe Crowley, former Congressman from New York, and former chair of the Democratic House Caucus, and now a colleague of mine here at Denton's. He's now a senior policy advisor. Another one of our Denton's colleagues is Ron Kaufman, who is currently the treasurer of the Republican National Committee and former White House political director under President George H.W. Bush. Also joining us, and he may be a few minutes late because he's finishing up teaching a class, is Michael Nutter, the former mayor of Philadelphia and current member of the Democratic National Committee and also a senior advisor at Denton's. And then Callie Fuselier, who's a principal at Denton's and former senior staff member to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and to Senator John Breaux. So welcome all. To kick off the conversation, I think I'd like to ask each of you to just take a minute and share your perspective of the upcoming election. And I'm going to turn the floor over first to Congressman Davis. So Congressman Davis, can you share some thoughts with us?
Well, first off, Eric, thanks. And I'm a little jealous that you're in Atlanta right now, where my Atlanta Braves are hoping to overcome that loss last night. So I don't know if you're bad luck yesterday or if I was bad luck yesterday, but I'm hoping for a win today, or we're going to blame you. Hey, I think the state of the race still favors Republicans nationally. Remember, you're going to see national polls. You're going to see a lot of effort put on what is President Biden's approval rating. If it ticks up a point, I mean, that's the national news story. But in the end, that's still within the margin of error of the last poll. So what you have to do is go in and delve into what's happening in the swing districts, the districts that are going to determine the outcome of the House of Representatives, for example. And I've seen recent polling that shows that in those districts, the intensity level of voters on the Republican side is upwards of 35% higher than those on the Democratic side. I think that can then change some statewide races, but most importantly, it can change the outcome of the House of Representatives and virtually guarantee split government in Washington, which means a much heavier oversight environment than what you're seeing right now. I think that's going to be the story. I still think it will be somewhat of a wave, but you got to keep in mind that we created somewhat of a wave in the House during the last election cycle that was not that no one thought would happen. And I still think this year gives us an historic majority.
Congressman Crowley, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts is, why did Rodney Davis get to go first? And my thoughts are, my Mets have destroyed my life. So I'm going to live vicariously through the New York Yankees now. And I see Mayor Nutter has also joined.
You can always root for the Phillies. You can always
no, I can't. Sorry, Mayor. I'm sorry, Mayor. Sorry. You know, I think it's a tough environment in a lot of respects. You know, given the inflation issues, I think as well as, you know, what we're hearing in terms of the tightening of these races. With that less than a month to go, I think people are starting to focus more and more on them. I do think that there are some issues that do benefit Democrats in this hand-to-hand combat, not the least of which, though, is the issue of the Dobbs decision and Roe, where that is exciting voters to get out. One could argue it's both sides, but then I'm a great believer when government gives something to people, it creates a bunch of ingrates, but when you take it away, it creates anger. And I think that is something that voters are dealing with. And I think I think Republicans want to, change the subject, but that is still going to be a very, very palpable issue, I think, this November. I also think that the Congress has had and the president has had a good couple of months here in terms of legislation passing, some bipartisan, some partisan. I think we still struggle with the issue of gas and inflation. And our friends in Saudi Arabia did no favors for us in the OPEC summit. But I think the races are naturally tightening because people are starting to focus on this.
So Ron, first, I'm sorry we're not talking about the Red Sox, but let me turn to you for your thoughts on the election.
Break my heart. Thank you, Eric. This is most likely going to be a wave election. In fact, the party of the president has only 3 times in our history lost seats, picked up seats in the House and Senate. They've lost seats. 1934, 1998, and most recently in 2002, following 9/11. The bottom line is that the most significant factor in the first year of an off-year election is the president's standing with the American people. With President Biden's approval rating in the low 40s, and 65% of Americans are saying that the country is moving in the wrong direction. These numbers speak volumes, I think, Eric, that by November 8th, a majority of the toss-up elections, both the House and Senate, will go the GOP way, and will control both branches of Congress, as my wise colleague, Congressman Davis said. If you look at the 3 leading nonpartisan websites that the press and most of us political geniuses follow all the time, they all say about the same thing. We'll pick up 6 to 10 seats in the House, and the Senate can be honestly looked at as still up for grabs. With the GOP having 47 seats leaning our way, the Democrats having 47 seats, 6 seats leaning their way. I mean, whoever wins 4 out of the 7 remaining seats, taking control. That's Nevada, New Hampshire, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. All those states voted for President Biden. And North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin, all states that President Trump won. So the bottom line is, one seat's going to decide this, Eric. And I'm afraid to say to you and all your friends in Atlanta, my guess is the Georgia seat will be the deciding seat. I believe it will go to a runoff due to the Libertarian candidate getting 4 to 6%. And in the end, that seat will determine it, and Herschel Walker will win another Heisman Trophy.
So Mayor Nutter, my assumption is you agree with everything Ron just said, but I'll give you a chance to speak for yourself.
You know, I've lived through these webinars, always agreeing with Ron and then being wrong. So, you know, I'm going to switch up and
Don't do it.
switch up in 2022. No, I think the general consensus here is it's tight all over the place. I think as Congressman Carly said, the president has had a good couple weeks, and even the Congress in general. The base vote on the ground, I mean, some of the activity that I see, certainly in Pennsylvania, we're paying very close attention, governor and Senate race, that the expectation there is those 2 are going to drive a significant amount of turnout. We have, 2 of the most extreme folks running for office in Mastriano and Oz. And Democrats are certainly very energized in that regard. You've got similar races in a couple other places. And so the question always comes down to, notwithstanding the polls and the pundits, who's energized? What kind of ground game do you have? And in many instances, if they haven't already, some people are going to start voting very, very soon, way before we get to quote unquote election day. And so I think it remains to be seen. I'm optimistic, and we got a lot. We do have a lot of work to do, and no one should think anything different as a Democrat.
So Callie, I'd love to get your perspective. I mean, you've actually worked on Capitol Hill. You're friends with a number of operatives that are still up there. So what's your sense of where things are right now?
So all of these gentlemen are fantastic and took all of my talking points. So I do have a few things though that I wanted to mention. When I was doing research for the panel, I was encouraged by the special elections that have already taken place. One that I want to mention is, although she had huge name recognition, Palin lost to Peltola in Alaska. Tim Ryan defeated Molinaro in New York. And then in the New York 23rd district, although the Republican won, he only won by 6 points in a +12 Trump district. So if you're a Dem, you're hoping that things will trend that way next month. And speaking of your great state of Georgia, I know everyone's watching that one. And although Herschel Walker is not making it easy on himself, there's also a gubernatorial race, and Jack Kemp is up, I think, about 6 points since the last poll that I saw. And many people think that this will benefit Walker because people will just go and vote party lines. That being said, for the Republicans to take the majority in the Senate, they have to flip one Dem seat and then win all 21 of their re-election races. So that will be difficult. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the abortion decision, the Dobbs abortion decision, like in Kansas. As we see, there was a big surge in women's voter registration, and we are predicting that that will happen around the country. I'm in Louisiana right now, and most people I speak with are in support of the Dobbs decision. So I think women will be turning out, but I think it's anyone's game at this point.
So Congressman Davis, let me go back to you. Ron, laid out, talked about how history, favors the party out that's not in power, doesn't have the White House in the midterms. But he also said pick up for Republicans of 6 to 10 seats. Do you think that number is right? What's the chatter among your colleagues in the House Republican caucus?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, if one of my colleagues is in a tough race, then they're thinking that everybody has a tough race, that it's going to be tough to even take the majority. But I think Ron is right. I think this is a typical off-year presidential year that favors the party not in power. I don't want to disagree with Ron as much as I enjoy disagreeing with Crowley, but I think Ron's estimates are a little low. And Callie and Joe are right about the Dobbs decision has inspired a certain group of voters or would-be voters to become energized. But where do they live? And frankly, what was their preference before they became energized? Is it going to just add a few more votes to a district that is a D plus 47? Okay, it doesn't matter to the majority in the House at all. But and I'll focus on the House because I know a lot of the folks on the call have a lot more knowledge of the Senate than I do. And frankly, I'm happy about that because I don't want to age as soon as I walk over into the Senate's gravitational pull. But when you look at the House, you've got to look back to 2020. In 2020, remember, Democrats were predicting to win 15 to 25 seats on election day, including mine. I was told I was going to lose on election day by the DCCC chair and by Speaker Pelosi. You go back to Charlie Cook, what the results were based upon what his predictions were. Every single Republican toss-up And at that point in time, there were a good number, over 20 of them, went to the Republican. Every single lean Republican and likely Republican went to the Republican. We didn't lose a single incumbent. Every single Democratic toss-up, 10 of them went to the Republican. And then when you look at the lean Democrats, and you look at the likely Democrats, many of those seats even went to Republicans. So we picked up, instead of losing 15 to 25 as predicted by the Democrats and by Charlie Cook and others, we gained a net of 15 on election day. We netted 16. Now, Callie mentioned special elections. I love bringing up special elections, and Joe can tell you that is what I told everybody as my talking point in 2018 as to why we would keep the majority, because we won the special elections. Well, we didn't win the majority and we got shellacked and the Democrats took over. But we will have an historic majority, I think, picking up a safe prediction of 8 of the Democratic toss-ups. I think we'll hold all the Republican toss-ups in the Cook report. And when you look at the possibility, that would give us a net of plus, and I believe a safe prediction would be plus 14 seats.
So Congressman Crowley, do you agree?
Well, I think that they're both Ron and Rodney are their numbers are lower than they were saying probably a year ago. I think the expectation was party the incumbent president loses seats in the first midterm election, as Ron Kaufman alluded to as well. But I do think this is a special year, and I think it's different in no small part because of the Dobbs decision, but also what happened on January 6th of last year, and the attempt by the Trumpites to overthrow the will of the people and the decision that had been made through the election of President Biden, and what effect that's going to have on voters as well. 60 NPR poll has it that 64% of Americans are concerned about the state of our democracy. They're concerned that our democracy is in real trouble. And I think that's a very, very important point to make as well. There are, I think, a number of things that will be driving people to the polls. I think the 1-6 task force will have an important meeting, I believe, next week. That'll also bring back to voters the attention of that issue. One point I will make about that special election upstate New York and New York 19, that we should have lost that seat. There's no question in my mind, given all that has been going on, and we didn't lose it. And in fact, there are 222 districts in the United States today under the new lines that have been made that are better statistically for Democrats than New York 19. So I think that also bodes for us as well. It's going to be about turnout. It's about hand-to-hand combat in all these different districts. It's about personality. Keep in mind, all the election deniers that have made it to the top of their ticket, the Republican ticket. The Republican Party is in trouble. It's not a healthy party. I think, Rod, you can recognize that yourself in terms of what happened in your situation. And I think the far right and Donald Trump, quite frankly, is still running the party.
So moving to the Senate, Ron and Callie and Mayor Nutter mentioned the Senate. Right now we have a 50-50 split. Vice President, as we all know, casts the deciding vote, or presides. So the Democrats are in the majority, and there's 10 races that I think everyone's really focused on: Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Colorado, New Hampshire, Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio. So Mayor Nutter, let me ask you specifically Pennsylvania, since that's one of the races everyone's watching. You're on the ground there. What do you think is, if you listen to the media, Fetterman had a pretty significant lead, but that seems to be shrinking. What's your sense from what's happening on the ground in Pennsylvania right now?
Well, if the legislature could agree, I'm sure, we should probably make purple the state color. It's just who we are. It's what we do. And Pennsylvania statewide races always tighten up as you get close to the election. I think it may have been you, Eric, or someone saying that, voters are starting to pay attention. They are. And when they see, and of course, they're now being bombarded with an aerial assault on their televisions and every other possible device. The reality is, of course, Oz is not from Pennsylvania, and Mastriano is trying to out-Trump Trump. I mean, he is way out there. And so, reproductive rights are certainly on the ballot in Pennsylvania, given that we're one of the states where things are legal. People understand a Mastriano win, what that would mean. People understand that voting rights are on the ballot. In Pennsylvania, the governor appoints the Secretary of State. Mastriano would literally be in charge of the entire electoral operation for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a truly frightening thought. So it'll be close. I am hoping and expecting, with a lot of work, that both should come through. Fetterman hampered, through the primary, of course, recovering from that stroke, but is getting better day by day, and is out on the campaign trail. And I think people are hearing that message that they need to hear.
So Ron and then Callie,
Yes.
the other three toss-up races besides Pennsylvania are Nevada, Georgia, and Wisconsin, at least according to the Cook political report, which we keep citing. So we'll just stick with that. But can you comment on those three, Nevada, Georgia, and Wisconsin? I mean, what's your sense of what's going on there?
Again, I'm going to go back to what the Congressman Davis said about the Cook report, which always historically is undercounted Republican strength election day. It's kind of a habit they have somehow. Nevada is going to be close. The last 3 or 4 polls I've had Laxalt ahead, and we have out-registered Democrats and in both independent voters turn Republican and Hispanic voters turned Republican over the last 2 years. We've had people on the ground for now 3.5 years. We've made significant increases, and I'm convinced that Laxalt will be one we will win. I'm sorry, what the other two you mentioned?
Well, Georgia, you already said you think that's going to be a runoff.
Yeah, it's going to run. Yeah.
And how about Ron Johnson in Wisconsin?
He's had 3 or 4 good days or weeks of polling now, and he's significantly he's probably 3 or 4 or 5 points ahead. And the governor's race in Wisconsin all of a sudden has collapsed and is very close. So those three, I feel pretty good about all these. If I could, Eric, going back to history, which is, I know we're both history buffs, this election reminds me of 1980 in this respect. Reagan was running against your fellow Georgian Jimmy Carter. It was, people forget, it was close going into the last 3 or 4 weeks, like now. And all of a sudden, the last 2 weeks, at a debate, Ronald Reagan said, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" And that somehow started a wave that brought in, as you remember, a whole bunch of freshman Republicans. We knocked off 7 U.S. senators. Now, a lot of those folks only won once, but they were there. And I'm convinced the same thing's going to happen this time. I think there will be a wave because people are going to go to the polls. And with all due respect to abortion, which is an important issue, and some of the other things may not have mentioned, I am convinced, is your 401k better off today than it was 2 years ago? Are you paying less or more for a gallon of gas than you were 2 years ago? Is inflation worse today or better today than it was 2 years ago? These every day we talk about pocketbook issues and kitchen table issues. With all due respect to some of the other issues, that's what's going to determine election day. To quote James Carville, it's about the economy, stupid.
So Callie, what's your thoughts on that? And then I actually do want to talk about some of these issues.
I agree with Mr. Kaufman on almost everything except for I do hope and believe that Warnock pulls it out in Georgia. I have to believe that the voters are smarter than you're giving them credit for. I think Nevada is going to be close, but I do think that we take that one too. And I don't know a whole lot about the Wisconsin race. I apologize, but maybe Mr. Crowley can speak to that.
Joe, anything on
Yeah,
Wisconsin?
I think I think Wisconsin is definitely tightening. I think Johnson is probably pulling away there, is my sense. But we'll see what happens. I think Ron may be right about that, but I do think the Nevada seat is going to stay in Democratic hands, and I do think that Warnock. I think the people of Georgia are a lot smarter than Herschel Walker. So I think that Reverend Warnock is going to take that. Is going to hold on to that seat for another 6 years.
But one thing as a Georgian, just to point out, is we are one of 2 states that have a runoff law. So you need to get 50% +1, and there's a libertarian in the candidate in the race, and
right,
polling between 3 and 5%. And so when the race is so close, we may find ourselves in another general election runoff, which we not too long ago we had one. Well, 2 years ago with when Warnock and Ossoff were running against David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler.
And our hope is that that former President Trump will weigh in at some point as well. So that's our hope.
So let's talk about President Trump, but also President Obama. I'd love to get your thoughts, and I'm going to start with you, Mayor Nutter, and then maybe go to Congressman Davis. How the two President Trump and President Biden, how are they impacting this election?
Well, again, at least in terms of the Pennsylvania aspect of any of this, both are certainly spending, a decent amount of time in Pennsylvania. I, generally don't give Republicans much advice, but I think the more Donald Trump comes to Pennsylvania, the better for us. We just need people to remember the lunacy and the danger, the existential threat to democracy, and just decency. I think Congressman Crowley said it. Clearly he is still the leader, continues to be the leader of the Republican Party. And, in many election races, he will be a detriment to those efforts because he can't help himself. So as Mastriano again tries to be the second incarnation of Donald Trump, that's a good thing in Pennsylvania for Democrats.
But what about President Biden? Because it doesn't appear that many candidates are having the current president campaigning for them.
Well, as I've seen the President Biden, he seems to be moving and crisscrossing the country fairly well. He's been in Pennsylvania, in different parts of Pennsylvania, I think multiple times over the last couple of weeks. I don't know that anyone is quote unquote running away from President Biden. I think folks are primarily focused on their own races, talking about even some of the things that Ron talked about, some of the local and pocketbook issues as opposed to national issues. So I don't get a sense that anyone is reluctant to be with or be around President Biden. I think he's moving very quickly, going from place to place and utilizing his presence strategically.
So Congressman Davis, your thoughts on the impact of President Trump and President Biden on this cycle?
Well, first of all, President Biden's doing a better job of actually going out into some of these districts. And what that does is it forces a decision for the candidate that has to be made. Do you campaign with him or not? And it's very hard as a sitting elected member of Congress not to go to an event with a sitting president of the United States. I campaigned with President Trump in 2018 when I had a very close race. But it's something you do. That's just, that's the benefit of working with the administration. You build relationships within the White House, within the different cabinet agencies, and you feel a sense of loyalty to stand with people who are the presidents who are even unpopular. But everybody on this call is correct that President Biden, President Obama, and President Trump, for that matter, have been given kind of a very large voice as to what our parties are all about. Look, I'm an example of President Trump's involvement in this election cycle. My district went from an even district to an R+22. I lost a primary to somebody that he endorsed over me. I got to give him and his team credit. They changed the polling and electoral data that we had over the last weekend in a primary, and we weren't able to win. And you know what? I give them credit for that. They deserve some say in what Republicans are doing. But Donald Trump is not going to decide where these Republicans in swing districts and the voters in swing districts are going to come out victorious or not on election night. And we can talk about Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, who's a stooge, who has no chance at winning. That's not the rest of the districts that we're seeing that are competitive to actually take over the House. And frankly, it's not Georgia. It's not Nevada. It's not Wisconsin. I think in the Senate race, you Democrats chose a flawed candidate in Fetterman pre-stroke. Post-stroke, that's allowed Dr. Oz to be much more competitive. And I agree with Mayor Nutter. That's going to be a very competitive race coming up. I agree with Joe Crowley. I never thought I'd say that on this call, or frankly.
What'd you say? Can you say that again? What'd you say?
I agree with Joe Crowley. Even though the Mets and the Phillies are terrible, and therefore Crowley and Nutter, that needs to be held against them in anything they say. But Ron Johnson's pulling away in Wisconsin, and you're starting to see regular candidates that have not just gone out and spewed crazy crap like candidate for governor in Pennsylvania has. They're coming up to where they're starting to be favored. Wisconsin and other states. Those are the types of races that I think indicate a wave environment that is going to be better, as Ron Kaufman said, come election day than what we're seeing right now. And I have high hopes in my home state of Illinois for picking up more congressional seats. I don't have high hopes for our Senate and our gubernatorial races because they're different. They're statewide. That's where you see the Roe v. Wade Dobbs decision come into play more so than in individual districts. That's why I'm optimistic, really optimistic on the House.
Hey, Eric,
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one thing, Congressman Davis, the one small thing that I think is important. I would never say that Mastriano can't win. I mean, certainly very extreme and says some really crazy things, but look, after our experience in Pennsylvania in 2016, we thought we had the most qualified candidate, since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, against someone who had never served and was really saying at the time the nuttiest things, and we lost. So, based on that, I take nothing for granted. And Pennsylvania Democrats, we have work to do, and we should not rest on, someone can't win. On any given Sunday, somebody can beat somebody else.
I agree with that, Eric. Real quick, I apologize, but Josh Shapiro is no Hillary Clinton. And if you guys thought Hillary Clinton was the most qualified candidate ever, I wish you would have talked to me first.
Well, Josh has been getting ready to run for governor since 4th grade, so I think he is fully prepared and geared up for this election.
Congressman Crowley, let me get you to weigh in on the role that President Trump and President Biden are playing in the election.
Did we lose him?
Oh, I think we may have. All right. Well, he'll rejoin, hopefully. I do want to ask each of you. We're going to do a lightning round at the end with some predictions, but I do want to ask each of you before we do that, what you think the big surprise will be the day after the election in this cycle. There's always a surprise, whether it's a House race, Senate race, gubernatorial race. What's going to be the surprise the next day? And why don't we start with you, Ron?
Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire loses.
Okay, we heard it here. Callie?
Hassan wins.
Well, Hassan wins. Okay. Mayor Nutter?
Oh, I'm going with the Reverend in your state. I think he's going to show surprising strength, and that the voters do reject the insanity that's going on in that race down there.
So without a runoff?
Without a runoff.
Without a runoff. Okay. Congressman Davis?
I think Kevin McCarthy has a larger majority than any Republican speaker has had in our nation's history because of our success in 2020 in picking up more seats than what they anticipated. And as I said, bare minimum guess, and I'm being pessimistic here, Republicans plus 14 in the House.
All right, Congressman Crowley, I don't know if you heard the question, but I asked what's the biggest surprise the day after the election. So what do you think the biggest surprise will be?
I think the biggest surprise will be that Democrats will have 51 votes in the Senate. I think we'll hold on to the Cortez Masto seat in Nevada. And I think I agree with Mayor Nutter that we're going to have 6 more years of Reverend Warnock as a senator. And I think that all contributes to the maintenance of the Senate in Democratic hands.
Okay, so here's the last 2 questions, 2 lightning round questions. Some of you have already answered this, so you can repeat yourself. But the first one is, who is going to hold the majority in the House and by how many seats? So let's start. Congressman Davis, we'll start with you. I'm writing these down because I'm going to pull out this piece of paper the day after the election.
Shoot, I forgot with the special elections where we are right now. I think we're +4. That would put us at I think we'll be at, I actually think we'll be at about 248.
All right, with Republican majority. Joe, what do you say?
I think Democrats narrowly hold on with 4 votes where we are right now.
Okay. Ron?
Well, after listening to Congressman Davis, I think we'll be at 240.
Okay. Callie?
I think the Dems hold on, but very narrowly, maybe 2.
Mayor Nutter?
Yeah, I was going to go with the 2 as well. Democrats holding on, but literally 2 votes.
I think we're breaking down my party here.
I'll go to 2. I'll go to 2.
All right, Joe's down to 2. Okay, now same question in the Senate. Who's going to hold the majority and by how many? And we'll start with Congressman Davis.
Republicans 51.
Joe? Oh, I think he's frozen. All right, Ron, let's go to you.
I will say Republicans at 51 also, I think, Eric.
Callie?
I'm going to say the Dems hold.
Democrats 51. I said that earlier.
Oh,
Okay.
You hear me?
Callie, you said the same thing?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mayor Nutter?
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I think we have an actual majority.
I say them is 51.
Right.
All right, well,
Not dependent on the vice president.
all right, well, this just broke right down party lines here. That's not fair, but I've got the record and we'll see who's right at the end. Unfortunately,
Eric, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
First? If the Democrats are right and it's +2 in the Senate, in the House, I would say the big surprise is going to be the end of Speaker Pelosi's term in office, no matter which party wins.
oh boy, that may be a good topic for another webinar. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. So this has been insightful, not as spirited as I would have hoped, but I want to thank all of our panelists, especially Congressman Davis for joining us. And of course, Joe and Ron and Mayor Nutter and Callie. And I also want to thank all of you for joining us and hope you'll join us when we get this group back together to dissect what happened in the election and then look ahead to 2023 and beyond. So with that, I wish you all a great balance of the day. Thank you all.